All right, welcome to Halitics. So glad to be talking today. It is Wednesday, hump day, and really excited as always have my good friend Chuck Pinocchio with us from One Payer States and fightfascism.us. Hey Chuck, how you doing today?
Doing well. Yeah, doing well. Thanks, Hal. How are you?
I'm doing well, and I appreciate your joining me. You know, I took yesterday off, and I just want to say it does feel kind of good because, I said I feel good, but reading the newspaper online, it's not really a paper anymore. It's just a screen, but it's been depressing. I got to say,
Yeah.
the past year plus with Trump has been rougher even than I expected. And even before that, Chuck, I haven't opened up the paper or, cracked open my clamshell laptop and read a lot of news that's puts a smile on my face.
hmm Yeah. Well, we need to breathe. We need to laugh. We need to find joy uh, in order to sustain us in this work. We got to find that happy balance. I'm going to be heading up to Philly in New York this weekend, catching up to friends, going to a sporting event, rugby of all things at the West Point Academy. So that's to watch my Cal Bears. They're a good rugby team. So
Oh, I did you go to Cal? I have a Cal Bear sweatshirt. My kids say I'm allowed to wear it because I did take classes there in one summer.
yes, I did. I started my schooling in I went to UC Santa Barbara for 2 years, 77 to 79, and then Cal at 79 to 81, where I graduated, and just
I think we've
great
discussed that
experience.
before. I totally
What's
can
that?
get why you would leave Berkeley, the weather there and move to central Pennsylvania. I mean, what a, improvement in terms of the climate, if nothing else, there in the Keystone State.
Yeah, well, I took 7 years off between undergrad and grad school, and then when I went back to grad school, I thought I would get a teaching certificate and teach high school history and civics. But as I was going through my education, I realized there's a lot more I want to learn here, and I talked to some people who had that experience and then went on to get a PhD, and ultimately I decided to get the PhD in what's called diplomatic history. And then at that point, coming out of really a second tier university, CU Boulder, it's not Madison, it's not Berkeley, it's not Harvard. You have to be a generalist. You have to really learn how to teach a variety of things to make yourself appealing on the job market, because it's really difficult to find a job then, and it's even harder now. So I had to cast the net, and that's what took me to Texas. I was in Corpus Christi right out of grad school, and then I got a job at Delaware Valley University up in Doylestown, Bucks County, Pennsylvania, and then I ended up at University of the Arts in Philadelphia. I taught at William Patterson for a couple semesters in northern New Jersey. But yeah, it's
Do you have a
higher
favorite
ed has certainly
place?
changed.
I'm
What's that?
curious about this. Did you like Texas? I've spent a little bit of time there. I thought it was very nice. Not in the Corpus Christi region, but was California. I mean, I would just sort of think I lived on the Central Coast. That one of my favorite places on the planet, I have to say.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I got to know Texas a little bit. I worked a House and Senate race back in 1984. That took me to Bay, which is outside
I'm
of
getting little
Houston.
audio problems there. Let's see. Hopefully it'll clear up. Anyway, I'm sorry. Just you're kind of a little bit in and out, but it'll probably work. You said you came to Texas, and go ahead.
Yeah, I was working at the time. I was working for SANE, Committee for Sane Nuclear Policy. I was part of active in the peace movement. That they set up a PAC, a Political Action Committee, and they put me on a House race, Texas House Race 8 against a sitting right winger, and worked for a guy named Don Buford and also Lloyd Doggett. Back then, Lloyd Doggett won a primary just razor sharp, and then he ran against Phil Gramm in the general election and got crushed. But earlier in the year, I'd worked for Tom Harkin, so in Iowa. So after that race, I got out of town. That wasn't a real fun experience. Actually, I enjoyed it. I learned a lot from it. But then I returned to Texas, then in 1997, right out of my doctoral program, and taught in Corpus Christi, Texas A&M Corpus Christi. But I got to tour the state with my then wife and young child. We got to Austin, we got to San Antonio. Texas has got a lot to offer. And Corpus is where the state aquarium is. So we actually got to hang out there quite a bit. My daughter just fell in love with these otters. They're swimming under the water. They're coming at you through the transparent glass. So that was very exciting.
Everyone loves the otters. The Monterey Bay Aquarium. I used to live in Monterey. I mentioned those otters are super popular. They're furry, they're cute. They're actually not very nice creatures, not to each other and not to anybody else either, but they're very furry and cute. So people want to embrace them. And the stuffed otters are very popular there. 240-242-5646 if you want to join us. Chuck Panacchia with us. And you can see from his websites that I put up there, onepayerstates.org. He is, I always get this wrong, but I'm going to say president. Is that right? Are you the president? And I think one of the original founders of that organization, and with a real kind of different take. The focus, of course, single payer. We see the rest of the world doing so much, especially, but really the rest of the world, not just the developed world. But I put this chart up there as the thumbnail. Better, worse, top is higher up you are, the better the care that is, or the less expensive per person, the lower, the more expensive, and to the left, the better outcomes. So you can see the U.S. far to the right and down, worst outcomes, we spend the most. Chuck, you would single pay? I mean, it seems obvious that's the solution, right?
It's certainly obvious to us, and it actually has an American flavor to it, because single payer is sometimes misunderstood. So let's just unpack it a little bit, right? Single payer means that there's a one payer, that there's one funnel of money, right? It's all pulled into one place. That's what's meant by single payer, but it's not the best term, frankly, and it doesn't test the best. And frankly, Medicare for All doesn't even test much better than single payer, and universal health care tests a little bit better. But I think just calling it healthcare for all is really the most simple, direct way to do this. Guaranteed, comprehensive, cradle to grave healthcare for all. That's what we're about. And our theory of change is that we need to model it at the state level. Not a single state has actually implemented a one payer or single payer or Medicare for all type system. But the idea here is publicly funded. It's an idea of the left, if you will, publicly funded, but mostly privately delivered, which is an idea traditionally on the right. And the idea of mostly private, the public delivery will remain the same for veterans, right? And for Native Americans, and some Medicaid recipients, that sort of thing. But the point is that the idea of mostly private delivery means that you get to choose your doctor, your hospital, your specialists. What the insurance companies have done now is they've hijacked the system so that they deny you your choice. It's actually anti-choice. It's anti-freedom. The current system is not only broken in the way you've described it, which is almost twice as much we pay per capita, per person, and get far worse outcomes across the board. And it's a tragedy that the health insurance industry, along with the pharmaceutical industry, along with the medical device industry, along with the big hospital industry, which are swallowing up all the private doctors. Between the four of them, they've destroyed healthcare in the United States. By and large, they've destroyed it because it's about Wall Street. It's about profits.
You talked about public payment, private choice, which, as I understand it, correct me if I'm wrong, that's basically what the Canadian people enjoy. Is that correct?
Yeah. Theirs is a one payer or single payer system. And the reason also that we call our organization one payer is it doesn't scare people off. We learned a long time ago that when you say single payer, and I lobby on Capitol Hill, I lobbied in Harrisburg for years, is that, the legislative aides and the members, they'll dive under their desk. They'll want to avoid the conversation because they automatically go to the S word, right? Socialism. It's not. It's not. The component of public funding, you could argue, is socialism, but it's actually not. Socialism is what you have in Britain, right, with the national health system, the NHS, where the doctors are paid by the state directly, by the government.
They're employees of the United Kingdom. Is it your view that, and I thought this was really interesting because according to the Commonwealth Fund, I put up that thumbnail, Australia, Netherlands, and UK have the best care. And UK, of course, has that National Health Service. Japan also does very well. Canada, a little more expensive, and maybe the outcomes aren't considered as good. I personally am like you. I love the whole idea of the Canadian system. You choose whatever doctor you want, and the doctor, you don't have to go to some clinic that the government chooses for you. So I agree with that, but it does seem the data is mixed on whether that leads to the cheapest and best outcomes.
Yeah, there are some holes in the Canadian system, and we need to be honest about that. So, Pramila Jayapal's Medicare for All bill and Bernie Sanders' Medicare for All bill, they're companion bills. They match each other. They're the same language. It's actually a design that would be better than the Canadian system. In fact, it would be one of the best systems, I believe, in the world, because it's comprehensive. The Canadian system is not comprehensive. It doesn't cover hearing, vision, dental. So that's an important thing to understand, that it's not comprehensive. Bernie and Pramila's bills do. Medicare for All Act in Congress does comprehend all those. And almost all the bills that we're supporting across the states, across 18 states that now have single-payer bills, are comprehensive. With the exception of long-term care, in some cases, long-term care, that's kind of that's the elephant in the room. That's because people, right now, actually, age longevity in the United States is in decline. People don't know this, but Americans now live more than 3 years less than our Canadian counterparts to the north. So life expectancy is a function of this broken healthcare system as well. And Native Americans die 20 years premature. There's a gap of 20 years between the average American age span and that of Native Americans.
Why is that? Do they have the least access to quality healthcare of all Americans?
It's not just healthcare; it's all social services, and also environmental conditions. I mean, they've been the reservation system puts these Americans, Native Americans, original Americans, on some of the most degraded environmental land. I mean, where nuclear testing was done, right, back in the late 40s and 1950s. I mean, disproportionately, Native Americans suffer and die from cancers that are attributable to those kinds of conditions. Plus, their education system is grossly underfunded. There are higher rates of alcoholism, but it's all interdependent, if you will. It's all intersectional. It's a function of, and this is why we need to build a strategy that connects all of our issues, connects all of our organizations and activists. So it's not just healthcare for all, but it's got to be health for all. Health is everything else, including democracy, environment, climate, education, housing, food. I mean, you name it. That's where Native Americans suffer across the board, is they come up short on all those social justice issues in terms of funding and support.
Chuck, we got another CP. We got a CP in the chat who writes, "This system will be better than Canadians? ? I want it now. LOL." I think that's how so many Americans feel. Now, you mentioned, I got a lot of different directions I want to go. I want you to talk about what you're doing in terms of some of your writing, but I guess the first place I'm going to start, given what you were just saying, is the 18 states that you mentioned where there's some type of healthcare for all legislation, at least pending or being introduced.
Right.
Are any of them close to being passed?
Yes, and I should also give a shout out to State Representative Carrie Reingans of Michigan, who is organizing all of her peer legislators. She's actually bringing them together for conversations, for meetings, for sharing ideas. 8 of them came to D.C. last July 15th. To be part of the rollout of the state-based universal health care bill, which is enabling legislation that allows states to capture those federal dollars. But what her ambition and our ambition is actually to get a universal health care bill in each of the 50 states, every single state next year. We want to get that done. And that needs also to be complemented by people working on housing. There needs to be housing for all legislation in every single state. There needs to be provisions for transportation, for childcare, you name it. I mean, the agenda that Mamdani ran on and talked, and in New York City, the rest of the world's not New York City, but what he addressed and what we talk about is he addressed popular issues. He ran as a populist. And the reason that the Democrats lose is they run away from those issues. They just tinker around the edges. So many of these Democrats say, let's just get back to where we were before Trump. Where we were before Trump gave us Trump. His pseudo right-wing populism, right? His phony right-wing populism sounded better to people than the Democrats who weren't even speaking to their issues, right?
Yeah. So let me put up this chart now. This is something you referred me to just before the program. So you're saying how this is how Democrats win, right? That the reason we have Trump is because Democrats don't embrace populist policies that improve the quality of people's lives. You can see here, you just refer to this. Maybe you can tell me the source of this chart. All likely voters, 65% support, only 26 opposed, 26%, some type of healthcare for all, one-payer system. I mean, it boggles my mind that, is it just purely corruption of the Democratic Party that they don't embrace this, or is there something else going on in your view?
That's a big chunk of it for sure. But I mean, it's the widespread corruption across not only Washington, D.C. that consumes, roughly 75-80% of members of Congress who are basically bought on this issue and most other issues, including, military, including environment, including energy, communications. But what this is a data for progress study that was done last November. So for people who want to take a look at this, go to dataforprogress.org. And it's a November 2025 document. And what's interesting is that the popularity for Medicare for all, which is, like you said, 65%, that's roughly where it's been for a number of years. But what's interesting is that people are now committed to it in a way that they haven't been before, because what the survey does is it throws the negative questions like, oh, your taxes are going to go up, or, and that in particular, people are saying, I don't care. Even if my taxes go up, we need healthcare. It's the number one affordability issue right now in the country. Healthcare is the number one affordability issue. And we're going to make a stink of that at the upcoming Netroots Nation conference in Philadelphia in June, at the Labor Nodes conference in Chicago also in June. We need to get this in front of people and understand that the way to get to a more stable democratic society is to give people what they need, what they demand. Fundamentally.
Give us the good news. You said that you do have some, what was the word? Hope, not optimism, but radical hope that we will see at least one or maybe more states embrace some form of healthcare for all, one payer. So give us the positive.
Yeah. So that's Oregon. They have their governance board that is actually putting together the entire system. and they'll be completed in the next 18 months, as I understand it. And then they're going to take that back to the legislature and then to the voters, so they could have their system in place as soon as 2028. If I have this right, 2029, I believe. And then our goal here in DC is to get this enabling legislation to pass at the same time, so that states like Oregon and Washington State is on the same path, the same glide path. Minnesota is a real possibility. New York, a much bigger state. In New York, they have the trifecta. And so there are a number of states, Massachusetts, Pennsylvania is reintroducing our single payer bill. Maryland is now moving toward a study bill. We already know what the study is going to say, but they have to go through the process again and again and again. But nonetheless, there's progress being made in Maryland and like I said, about 25 states in total. So the good news is that states are where all the good reform and activity is going on right now, as Washington, D.C. is completely in the completely under control of Trump. I mean, the Republicans are so fearful, they don't dare cross him. And the Democrats are divided, to put it politely. They don't really there's no unity in the Democratic Party. There's no vision, as we talk about. There's no strategy. And until we get to that strategy, it's very difficult to see how we succeed. So that's the work I'm doing with folks on the outside. And then at a certain point, once we've built the train and the train tracks and the train's leaving the station, all of even the self-interested politicians are going to want to jump on board. So it's going to happen, I believe, in the 2031 to 33 period. That's when we're going to get national Medicare for all.
Well, I think the idea that one state like an Oregon, which is not a tiny little, so not one of the bigger states, but not a tiny state either, might in fact implement this system really could be the domino, the first domino to fall. And then the others will, because as voters, not necessarily as politicians, maybe some politicians, as voters and some candidates see the success, they'll rush to emulate it. But here's the fear. Let me just give you the counter argument.
Sure.
Vermont was there, right? I mean, they did have some type form of healthcare for all. And I understand it's a tiny state and I have a million people, and so you don't have that, the value of like a very large risk pool, right? It's a smaller risk pool than many big cities, but still, even under those circumstances, this probably should have worked, and it ultimately unraveled in the Green Mountain State.
It never was implemented. And to your point, Vermont's about 600,000, the same size as Washington, D.C., the same size as Bucks County, Pennsylvania. It is a small pool population. It really is small. That's why we're more hopeful with a state like New York. But what happened in Vermont is two major things. Governor Shumlin was not as popular as he thought. So that even though he was running on this legislation, he had other issues, and he ended up getting less than 50% of the vote. So what happens in Vermont when the governor has a plurality yet a pluralistic victory, but not a majority victory? The vote then goes to the legislature, and what Shumlin did is he traded in his support of their single payer proposal to get back to the governor's mansion. So he sold it out before it was ever implemented. So Vermont never actually made that effort. The other thing that was problematic with Vermont, and we hope these other states are learning, is they never made any effort to bring the federal healthcare dollars back to the state. Those are Medicare, Medicaid, children's, like the CHIP program, federal employees. That accounts for about 60% of all healthcare spending to the federal dollars that we pay to Washington, D.C. for Medicare, Medicaid, CHIPs, federal employees, veterans, American Indian care. All that stuff is a huge chunk of the money. And the states need to be able to bring that money back to the states and put it into that single pool that we talk about, the single payer pool. So you have one funding mechanism so that when people go get their health care at a doctor's office, at a hospital, at a clinic, they submit the invoice to the same place. Everybody submits it to the same place.
Right, the provider. And let's just be clear, the provider is the one who bills the government. That's how it works in Canada. And by the way, this is a much, much more efficient system as well. You don't have to deal, if you're a healthcare provider, with a lot of different insurance companies and with people who are maybe uninsured or underinsured. You don't have to collect from the people who don't have, because of a copay or what have you. You just send that one bill at the end of every month, and doctors greatly prefer it. So there are many advantages, obviously, to the system. What you're describing, that Vermont did not make the effort, and maybe they wouldn't have been successful, but they didn't even make the effort to claw back those funds. They were essentially paying twice. They were paying double for healthcare. They're paying the federal government to cover the kids, and then they would have had to they would have covered the kids themselves. So that's a big issue.
Right. So what they were in the position of was being a multi-payer system, right? Not a single or one-payer system. And what that means is that they have to manage all these different pools of money, all these streams of money. And what that means is that there's a layer of administration that sucks money out of the healthcare itself. And, PNHP and others, Physicians for National Health Program and others, economic think tanks have done these studies, and they say that the administrative overhead, which is the bloat of bureaucrats that are involved in this complicated collection and payment system, between that and the greed of these industries who are feeding Wall Street and taking their cues from Wall Street, like profit first. So greed, abuse, just inefficiency accounts for somewhere between 25 and 35% of all healthcare spending. Think about that. 1 out of every 3 healthcare dollars is basically flushed. Now take a look at the Taiwanese system. Their administrative overhead is 1.3%. The Taiwanese system. And everybody has, you pull out your license, and you've got that now, the real ID license. Many people have that, right? That little chip that's inserted there on your license, right? That little chip is very similar to your healthcare card. I'm just giving people just a demonstration here. Like, that's what people do. They carry around a healthcare card. It's got this little chip. And that little chip, you insert it into a little machine when you come into the hospital or to the doctor's office, and they can read your entire medical history. It's right there.
Yeah.
So they don't have to go chasing after this specialist or that specialist and wonder, did you get tests done
or
last
have
year?
You bring your x-rays, right? Go get your own x-rays. You have to go wait at the doctor's office. I mean, I just a personal anecdote. My wife sent me to her orthopedic surgeon to get some x-rays, and I couldn't even get them because, well, you're not listed as somebody who's authorized, and I had to bring her signature and this, and they had to compare. It was a huge pain. This is the Holy Grail. It's just that the system is carried everywhere by the patient themselves. I know there's privacy concerns, but presumably those can certainly be addressed, that only the person who has that card with them can authorize the release. So it should save it. Right. Chuck, we have a lot of places to go. I want to just diverge for just a moment, and it's more of a tangent. It's not moving completely in a different direction. But your 2 websites there, onepayerstates.org, obviously your commitment to healthcare for all, also fightfascism.us. We've talked about the connection between the two. Supporting single payer, one payer healthcare for all is the way, I believe, to fight fascism. I wanted just to share this with viewers. This is a little bit off track, not 100%. I do subscribe to Jamie Dupree's news release pretty much every day, every few days. I know this has been a concern of yours and many other progressives, including myself, the SAVE Act, making it much more difficult to vote. How do you react to this, that it looks like the Republicans may not get this bill passed?
I don't take that one to the bank. This is a party that's built on fear. It's a party that is drinking the Kool-Aid. It's a party that follows their Fuhrer, their leader, because they don't want to be primaried. They don't want to, face the wrath of their voters. Just as a quick aside, and we're going to talk about war and peace issues, but I'm actually shocked that more Republicans haven't broken ranks from Trump on wars, because he ran as a no more wars candidate. He was very explicit about that, as well as releasing the Epstein files. But just to get back to the SAVE Act, which would require people to prove they are who they are, especially women who change their name after they get married, then they need to go get some other government ID, let's just say a passport. The State Department has been throwing roadblocks in the direction of people trying to get a passport since last November. And this only recently came out, I think about a month ago. But for people who are trying to get a passport, the wait line is indefinite. It could be a year or more before you get your passport, which is another form of ID. More than that, this is a poll tax, because you have to pay for a passport, even if you get it, or some other form of government ID. In Texas, if you have a gun owner's license, they allow that to be your ID for voting. But if you're a student, they don't allow you to use your student ID to vote. I mean, it's rigged. Talk about rigged.
It's really bad. It's a really bad law. Trump is trying to also jury rig in their anti-trans bill to be part of it, which makes zero sense when it comes to voting. A and B shouldn't happen anyway. Is a bad bill to begin with. But he just wants to try to stick that in there. And I do wonder if the goal is also to make it very hard for trans people to vote, because you have to have the right sex, your birth sex or whatever on your ID. And, just one more way to make it difficult and to be hurtful and harmful. I think what the positivity, though, the good thing about this, at least as I read it, as Dupree describes, Democrats appear pretty much willing to fight this one. They're not likely to cave. And the only way Republicans could get past that is to somehow reform the filibuster. And they're very reluctant or unwilling to do that as well. So I think there is some reason to feel that bill isn't going to become law. Maybe we're wrong. Maybe I'm too optimistic about that.
Again, I'm eyes wide open. I look at one of the things that we need to do in building strategy is build in scenarios, whether the SAVE Act passes or not, whether ICE is going to be present, right, at polling places, especially where younger voters are, people of color, the outcomes of the effects of the gerrymandering, which may actually backfire on the Republicans. It may backfire because they narrowed their margins, their vote margins. And we're seeing, during the earlier voting of this year's special elections, that a lot of these districts are swinging double digit from Trump's numbers. But having said that, Hal, and I don't mean to be an alarmist here, but we also need to prepare for a scenario that is really quite predictable under fascist governments, which is no elections. It's 100 years of history, and there's almost no discussion. There's increasing bits of discussion, but in the mainstream legacy media, corporate media, Democratic Party, almost no discussion or preparation for the possibility. And I think it's 50-50, that if Trump says we're going to get crushed at the polls, he's going to either jump on an existing emergency, or he's going to create the conditions of an emergency, which would then justify declaring martial law, suspending the Constitution, and canceling the elections, and saying we can't go any further. Lebanon just unilaterally extended their legislators' term in office by 2 years because of the war coming at them from Israel. I don't know if you saw that.
I didn't, but I can understand that, because Israel has so destabilized its neighbors and caused so much destruction on its borders that I can imagine that legislators are very leery of having any elections. I mean, that to me, I can understand. Obviously, the situation here is completely different, although the justification presented might be similar.
Fascism has never come to power through the ballot and then allowed a free and fair election ever in 100 years.
How do we prepare for this? Because you're saying we have to prepare for it. So, and you also told me off air, I think it's time to share it, that we need to have not only just a plan, but we need to be, organized against this. How? What do you propose?
Building a mass movement around a theory of change, which is another way of saying a unified strategy in order to achieve long-term the goals of social justice across the board. Now just go with me for a minute here, your listeners. I come at this from somebody who, as a teenager, was introduced to a book called Looking Backward, which was set in dystopian Boston during the Gilded Age, the late 19th century. And the book takes you 100 years into the future. You just have to roll with this. So the protagonist in the story, Julian, goes 100 years into the future. He actually goes to sleep in this tomb under a house, and he's discovered 100 years later. Just you have to kind of roll with this. He wakes up, and he finds that he now lives in utopian Boston. And the book is then a discussion between him and the new homeowner, who's a doctor. And the question is, how did we get here? How did we get from a dystopian society, dystopian Boston, to a utopian Boston, where everybody takes care of each other, right? Where there's housing for everyone, quality jobs, clean environment. And really the ethos is that people are really committed to taking care of one another. And so the question is, how do we do that? I'm not saying that we're going to have a utopian world 25 or 50 years from now. But what I'm saying is if we don't plan for it, it's absolutely not going to happen. If you don't build a strategy to achieve something like that, you're not going to get there. And we currently don't have a strategy. So the answer to your question is we need to have short term, as in this year. Like, how are we going to deal with elections that go completely sideways? Maybe they're canceled. The Republicans don't accept the outcomes. Trump won't accept it, just as he did after 2020. When that was coming down, and all my friends were saying, "Oh, he's going to accept the outcome of this election." Are you sure? Are you sure? I have to say that I was one of the relatively few people who was not surprised by what happened on January 6th. And that's not to pat myself on the back. I'm simply a student of history. That's who I am, and I think we have to look at this with eyes wide open and consider all scenarios. So for people who would say, oh, that couldn't happen, we could say that about 1,000 events during the Trump administration. You keep saying it 1,000 times. At what point are you actually going to consider these really bad outcomes as possible, if not probable? So this isn't to be fatalistic, it's being realistic and planning for what we do. So what the answer is that we got to wake the Democratic Party in particular, wake them the F up and understand that this is a very real scenario. What are you going to do? How are you planning? What are you going to say? But we're not going to wait for them. When I say we, all social justice organizations have got to pull ourselves together so that we become the voice of the people. We become the populist voice of the people. We become the ones who are saying we're all committed to the social justice agenda, including restoring democracy, or at least Republican style, our Republican style representative democracy. So it involves many, many steps, but they're all fundamental. And they begin with visioning that future and then reverse engineering, unpacking that future. What did that future look like? How did we get there? What do we have to do in terms of relationship building, leadership development, coalition building, messaging, communications? Did we create think tanks that were connected to one another? That's what we have to do, because they're not connected. On the political center and left, think tanks are in their own realm. They're in their own world. There's no messaging discipline whatsoever. Media ecosystem, we have to create a media ecosystem that's linked and connected. We have to create a strategy for sharing good legislative ideas, similar to what the right wing does with ALEC, right? The American Legislative Exchange Council. We have to create something comparable.
Let me just jump in. By the way, CP, the other CP, you're one CP, obviously, Chuck Bonacchio, the other CP in the chat said, great speech. He really appreciates what you're saying, as do I. But let me try to see some of the logistics, shall we say. What
Sure.
I try to do here on this program, my little contribution is trying to bring people together in support of truly left, let's not even use the word progressive anymore, truly left populist candidates. Some Democrats, like a Graham Plattner, like a Mamdani, although Mamdani is not apparently prepared to take on his own party. There are aspects of the Tallarico campaign that I really appreciated, his top versus bottom as opposed to left versus right. I thought that was spot on. But all of it feels like it's not enough. It's insufficient. Even, promoting the Green Party, which frankly doesn't seem to be having any effect. I just, building a think tank, man, that costs billions or many millions, and the billionaires aren't on our side. How do we unite people together? And even if we do that, is that going to be enough if Trump does call in the military and violates the Posse Comitatus Act and other laws designed to protect us from a fascistic or authoritarian executive?
Yeah. So the institutions largely already exist. It's simply a question of connecting them, getting them on the same page, unifying around a coherent strategy, a set of steps that need to be taken to collect our power. Just to boil it down, it's not a matter of spending. There's a lot of money already that's already being spent on Center for American Progress, on the Brookings Institute, on you name it, any number of think tanks that identify as progressive or left. But the question is, how do we connect them? So I'm working on a project with Rob Call of Op-Ed News. You might know Rob a little bit. And he already has an infrastructure website that will allow organizations to come into that website and then claim their profile and then fill it in with information so that everybody who's part of that, let's just say, ecosystem on that website will be aware of what One Payer States is doing, of what Physicians for National Health Program are doing, of what Food and Water Watch is doing, so that all of the organizations and all the different realms of our social justice politics are learning from each other and connecting and not stumbling across one another or repeating the same activities. The problem with our current structure in social justice organizations is that these organizations suffer from what I call the nonprofit industrial complex, which is they take money from their donors, and their donors actually restrain them from achieving the stated mission of the organization, because the donor class intersects like a Venn diagram with the right-wing donor class. So neoliberals penetrate into these organizations that were ostensibly progressive or visionary or leftist to begin with, and they pull them back. And they say, you can do this, you can do town halls, bringing people together to talk about single payer, but we're not going to embrace Medicare for all. We're not going to do that. You can only go incrementally forward. And that's the role of the money. The donor class pulls back on these organizations. And what we have to do is break out of that problem. And we're going to work with mostly small and middle-sized organizations because the problem is more pervasive among the larger organizations. And I'm not even going to name them because I don't want to throw anybody under the bus here. But you get the idea here, is these large organizations, I mentioned one of them, Center for American Progress, which does a lot of good work. But at the end of the day, they are incremental. They do a lot of good programs, but they don't push the envelope.
Well, I'm going to even say with the Center for American Progress and some of the others, not only they're incremental, but they're not even incrementally necessarily positive. To the extent there's change, often it's not for the better. And yeah, that's very, very, very worrisome. Chuck, you mentioned Iran. We're talking about ways to bring people together, right? To kind of do what Tallarico did was with a great deal of success. But I'm going to talk about the Tallarico Crockett race tomorrow with my guest, Don Bossett. He'll be a first timer on Halitics. Looking forward to that. You're going to want to enjoy, you'll enjoy that. If you're a viewer, we talked, Chuck, you and I, about how single payer, one payer healthcare for all can be a unifying issue, bring people together along class lines, which is, of course, what we want. You also, I believe, as do I, see Iran, the war by the right wing, by Trump, MAGA, and the billionaires on Iran as another issue that can bring folks together in opposition. And you wrote about that. So tell us about that. Tell us about your piece here. We run once again to Iran.
Right. A little wordplay there. Yeah, it was fairly predictable. This is, here we are, the negotiating parties are getting ever so close, perhaps within a week of a peace agreement. And Netanyahu and Trump, I think in that order, that's the best reporting we have, said, we don't want peace with Iran. We want to take down Iran. We want to change the regime. We want to take control over Iran, which is the Greater Israeli Project, the Greater Israel Project, right? Which is to control the entire Middle East. And this isn't any kind of a theory or a conspiracy. Mike Huckabee, the U.S. ambassador to Israel, has said, we welcome that. Yes, we think Israel should control, with the backing and support of the United States, the entire Middle East. And so this is not just a war on Iran, right? This is, that war becomes a distraction from other things, including the Epstein files, including the demise, the economic impact here in the United States, the blocking of the Gulf of Hormuz, the Straits of Hormuz, excuse me, and any climate issues. You name it, healthcare issues. It all becomes a distraction from the distraction from the distraction. So the idea here was and is to create conditions where the United States and Israel can take control of the Middle East and the resources of the Middle East and put puppet governments into power. And they have puppet governments in many places already, right? Bahrain, UAE, the United Arab Emirates, there's a number of them, that are in the pocket, that have been cowed by the Israeli-U.S. power broking. And Iran is not in that league. Iran is an independent state. And the way the media covers Iran in the West is so distorted, as if Iran is a real threat to all these other countries. And Trump is trying to claim, and unfortunately, a lot of his followers come to the belief that Iran was going to attack us, the United States, which is absurd, patently absurd. But nonetheless, this is what wag the dog politics looks like, right? Which is getting ahead of all these other scandals by creating this major emergency. And this could be the tripwire that leads to the cancellation of the elections in the United States. I don't rule anything out. I don't rule anything in. We have to keep an eye on how this thing unfolds. But Trump overrode the advice of his national security team, who have just gone quiet. But the vast majority of his national security team said this is not a good idea. There's no end game. There's no exit strategy. There's no clear purpose in doing this. And all it's just become a game, and it's messing with the economy. It's upsetting people, and there really is no end in sight. So this is morphing into a global conflict, because it's wreaking havoc with the economy of the world, the energy economy in particular. But the energy economy touches everything else, right? Agriculture, transportation, housing. You name it. This is creating a global economic crisis at the same time that we have this military crisis over Iran, which has given license for the Israelis to go after Lebanon. They want to destroy Hezbollah, take control of Lebanon. They want to crush the West Bank once and for all and finish the job in Gaza. And so I hope that answers your question.
No, it's so disheartening. It's all true what you're describing. And again, I think this is an issue that if the Democratic Party were really serious about defeating Trump, about restoring freedom and democracy at home, and also improving the quality of life of poor Australian working people, they would be united in opposition to this war, they would be saying what former Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene says in this tweet I just posted, or X, whatever they call it. Please, South Carolina, send Lindsey Graham to the front lines instead of your precious children. And then she linked to this his absurd statement about we should, basically Spain is dead to us now because they won't let us use our bases there to target Iran. So this shows again to me that you're right. This is an issue that can unite not just the left, but it's a top bottom issue. The bottom doesn't recognizes the only thing they're getting out of this is more expensive gasoline and more casualties. They fight working class people are disproportionately represented in the enlisted class in the military. They're the ones who are fighting. They're the ones who are, some of them dying, killing. They don't like it. They don't want any part of this. But if we're not going to see a political party that will stand firmly against this, and we're not seeing that, I don't know what I don't know how we can win. I don't know how we can defeat them.
Right. Well, I mean, there were 4 Democrats or so-called Democrats who broke with the party. And one thing we didn't mention here is they take a pledge to uphold the Constitution of the United States. Problematic as the Constitution may be, the Constitution is very clear that only Congress shall declare war. That is a fundamental tenet of the Constitution. And you've got people like John Fetterman in the Senate who is just brain-addled. I don't know how else to put it. I know John. I know him going back many years from Pennsylvania politics, but he has completely lost it. And he was interviewed by Zateo the other day, and all he could say was, I support Israel. I support Israel. It's like, excuse me? Were you elected to support Israel, or are you elected to represent the state of Pennsylvania and your constituents? I mean, that's all he could say. And does this really support Israel? Really, the long-term benefit of Israel? It's just delusional, and it also brings a lot of these real zealots, these religious zealots, into this whole discussion. These are folks who really want to bring us to the end times, right?
Rapture, the rapture.
I mean, there is that element, and there.
Well, that's Huckabee, right? Isn't that Huckabee?
Yes. Yeah. No, these are crazy people who are really lunatics, who have no concern for humanity. And in fact, they dehumanize these other populations. I mean, they see the Palestinians as subhuman. There's no other way of putting it. They degrade them entirely of their humanity. And children are seen as would-be terrorists. I mean, infants even. I mean, this is sick. There's a real sickness. But I guess, it's these members of Congress, like Ro Khanna. I heard him interviewed the other day. We work closely with him on the State-Based Universal Healthcare Act. And of course, he partnered up with Tom Massey to put forward this really toothless war powers resolution. It wasn't even anything binding, but it was a statement of principle that Congress needs to step up and play its role in war making. And 4 members just cut and ran. And they were the difference in that bill going down in the House. It's just shameful. I mean, a complete abdication of your role and responsibility in your pledge as a member of Congress. These people need to be primary. They need to be run out of town. So, I mean, the Democratic Party was mostly unified here, but they have to be clear and go further than that. Unfortunately, a lot of those who voted for that resolution don't actually oppose the war. They just oppose the process of the president acting unilaterally without even checking in with them.
Oh, right. I see this over and over. Well, I won't shed any tears for the Iranian regime and this and that. It's always being prefaced with, well, Iran's really bad, but we don't like the way the president just unilaterally did this. No, they're a sovereign state. And the reason they have a theocracy is a direct response to the 25 years of authoritarianism by the Shah, who we imposed on the people there. And if you want to defeat the theocracy, then work with the government there to make life a little better, improve the quality of life for the people of Iran, not work with moderates. Did I lose you, Chuck? Okay, yeah, we're good. Okay,
Yeah,
but that's
I mean,
not the goal, as you said right out. That's not the goal. The goal is just more death, more destruction,
and control.
regime change.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and of course, this goes back, your listeners are educated, you are, but goes back to 1953, Mohammad Mossadegh, who was democratically elected. He was a democratically elected democratic socialist who dared to declare that Iran's resources were their own. Oh my gosh. What a concept. Like, for somebody who were to come here and say, no, we own that. We own your oil. We control your oil. Then they overthrow him. There's the CIA and then installs the senior Shah. And then his son comes to power in the 60s. And then, of course, is deposed in the 1979 Iranian Revolution. Like you said, but it was a radicalized environment because of all of the chaos created by this puppet of the United States and the West, of oil companies, right, who were just raping Iran. So this has a longer history. We need to understand it. And this war has nothing to do with democracy. It has everything to do with control, with resources, as well as distracting from the Epstein files and the crisis that Trump faces. This is coming at him. It's continually coming at him. But the more it comes at him, this is my concern, is that the more this war gets ramped up and the greater the possibility, sorry to say this out loud, of there being a nuclear exchange that could just go wild.
It's really, really, really upsetting. And I'm just going to make, before we let you go, which we're practically then the hour, but it's always a great conversation with you, Chuck. I always learn so much. Everyone learns, we all learn from you, and we appreciate it. I'm just going to make my final, I don't know if it's a case or pitch or whatever, but what I always ask organizers like yourself, people who have a little influence, is we got to look beyond the Democrats. I just feel so strongly that way. And I'm hoping, maybe I'm wrong, and maybe Graham Plattner signifies a true turning point, because he is saying all the right things. I thought Tallarico ran a very good populist campaign in a lot of ways. I have my issues with Tallarico. I'm not going to bring those up here. I just want to talk about you mentioned trifecta states. Maryland's a trifecta state. House Speaker Jocelyn Pena-Melnick ultimately replaced the former speaker there, who was a long time sort of centrist, old boy Paul type. And Jocelyn Pena-Melnick was touted as a real progressive. She's a Latina, Afro-Latina, I think is how she describes herself. I don't want to call her what she doesn't. She comes from a more impoverished background. And you can see this is so, you share this with me, by the way, Chuck, you share this with me. So there she is, special guest of this group. They call themselves Healthcare for All, but they are basic responsibility, their job, their task was stopping Healthy Maryland, which would be a one-payer solution. And you can see just from the cost of those tickets that this is all about an industry-sponsored group that doesn't want to lose the hydrant of money that it's forced into it through for-profit healthcare.
Yeah, it's a bait and switch. It's political deception at its worst. And where people need to align their activism is with Progressive Maryland, right? Yeah.
Healthy Maryland is the group. Progressive Maryland, Healthy Maryland is the legislation.
Right.
And the Progressive Maryland is an organization that works in Maryland. And I used to work with them a little bit. I have some approval agreement with them, some disagreement. They're very tied to unions. You and I are both supporters of the labor movement, Chuck, but we also know that the leaders in those movements are often work in contravention of their rank and file's best interests. So I have some skepticism there too. They're pretty closely tied to Democratic leadership, unfortunately, in my opinion. But I don't know what we do about this. I'll give you one other point that really frustrates me about the whole situation there with Speaker Pena-Melnick, obviously lending her office's significant power pull to this, is that the author of Healthy Maryland, the legislator, the delegate who has been strongest, most consistent in her insistence that we need one-payer health care, Sheila Ruth, also supports Peña Melnick and isn't willing to say no. Isn't willing to call out leadership. And we see this over and over with Democrats, as we do with, you mentioned the cowardice of so many Republicans and their unwillingness to take on Trump because of their fear of losing office. I see this with Democrats all the time. Mamdani won't even call for primarying Jeffries.
Yeah, and he bent the knee to Governor Hochul too. Yeah, this is disappointing because the lieutenant governor, as I think we may have talked about, was challenging the sitting governor, Delgado. And Delgado was running for governor on the New York Health Act, their single-payer bill. And he was also running against fracking, which Governor Hochul supports, and also running against the construction of new pipelines. And so, as well as he supported Delgado, he supported the Wall Street transaction tax, which is the easiest taxation you can get money from. I mean, it's such a no-brainer, for all these day traders who are just playing with the market. Put a penalty on them, put a tax on them. This behavior really messes with the economy, and it's just a parlor game for these people. But a really quick, easy way to raise money to pay for housing, childcare, and healthcare. And so it is a little bit disappointing. What is kind of a curious thing is that Mamdani, does seem to have this personal relationship with the Orange Man in the White House. He was able to get one of the ICE arrested immigrants released. I think it was a Columbia University student, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know what that's going to lead to or what it could lead to, but the reality is that this is the problem with social justice organizations. We all should have rallied to Delgado. We all should have rallied to him to challenge Hochul on these very core issues. And if Delgado was even a long shot against Hochul, we have to take that shot. That's our best opportunity in the moment. That's what we need to do. So that's partly on us. I'm just going to say that we need to step up. We as social justice organization leaders need to step up. I was doing some behind the scenes outreach to try to figure out what was going on, and I didn't get the intel, frankly, in time to take really constructive, necessary steps. But people were more in the know than me, who should have known better. And that's not to say, hey, I'm better or whatever. But the point is that we need to be connected. We need to be cohesive. We need to be on the same page, and we need to have that same strategy. That's the larger point.
Well, I agree with you 100%. But I would just make this point: if the newly elected, self-proclaimed Democratic Socialists, very, very popular mayor of New York City is going to endorse Hochul, I don't know how you're going to beat her with Delgado.
That shouldn't have happened. And AOC did the same thing.
I hear you. And I was going to throw her under the bus too, which I frequently do, because I think she throws she throws leftists under the bus every chance she gets, unfortunately. Yeah. But I know we on the left have a real problem. I don't think I have this problem, but so many do, where we confuse the personality, we confuse the person with the policy. And right. And we're seeing this. I just mentioned the Texas race one more time. There's so much, there's a lot of rancor between the Tallarico supporters and the Crockett supporters right now, and race plays a big part of it. I think if instead we were focused on policy, we said, well, these are the policies we want them to pass because they're best for our communities, then we could unite together, because I think we all pretty much agree on those policies with some differences. No, they're not 100%, but there's a lot of agreement.
Yeah, it's a good point. And it even applies to the Bernie-crats, right? Which is that we get caught up in the cult of personality. And then when that person does something we don't like, it's like, oh, we're so disappointed. Well, politics is politics also, right? So that what we can control, we can control. What we can control on the outside is being strategic, is being together, and being cohesive, right? Is acting in concert and using our power effectively rather than being scattered all over the place and easily divided. There was a good it's gone viral, the press conference the other day when Levitt got up there and she was challenged by the CNN reporter, and who was asking about the coverage of the service members who had died and so forth, and like the special service that was going to be done in Dover, Delaware, and so forth. And what she did is she turned it into, you guys just don't want the president to succeed. So what our politics does in this country is it becomes personalized and blood on the floor, so that Trump is always trying to play both the victim and the savior. Think about that, right? He's always the victim and he wants to be seen as the savior. Those are his two tenets. And everything coming out of the White House, out of the cabinet, out of the Republican Party is all designed to prop this up. Is that we're victimized, right, by trans people and immigrants and people who don't look like us or worship like us. And we're the only ones who can save you. We're also the savior. That is a very fascistic propaganda technique. We need to see that for what it is, because unfortunately, it's very effective for many, many people who drink the Kool-Aid.
All right, Chuck, I always have my guests give the final word. Was that your final word, or do you want to throw something else out there? Maybe something you would like to promote in this moment?
Just to have folks who are listening either live or, picking up the YouTube recording, please do, check out the work we're doing at onepairstates.org, and jump on board and get your member of Congress to support the state-based universal health care bill that Ro Khanna is carrying in the House, and your two senators, get them to support Ed Markey's companion bill in the Senate. And then there's a lot of valuable stuff over at fightfascism.us, just to kind of educate yourselves up and others about what this is that's coming at us. And I actually do have a third website, it's justiceforall.global, which is a pro-democratic sort of website, but just stick with those two. You'll get fed over to the other one. But I think we're building a movement here, and we want people to be smart and strategic and thinking and working with us and seeing big picture and seeing that vision, that future vision. So thank you so much, Al, as always.
All right. It's always great to talk to you. And I lied. I said I'd give you the last word, but I'm going to add on to what you just said. I so support what Chuck's doing with One Payer States and the entire organization. I just do agree that is the path forward. And I think it's really was a brilliant idea that you came up with to push this, because, and I know it wasn't just you, but I mean that to bring people together who supported One Payer States, because I just don't see Congress as being right now capable of delivering this critically important human right to the American people. And I do think it can be done through the state. So I thank you for that, Chuck.
Oh, 100%. And thank you for your support and everybody else who is tuned in. Yeah, it's just a grassroots movement. It's bottom up. Thank you so much.
All right. I'll be back tomorrow. I mentioned Don will be joining me. We're going to talk about Talarico, Crockett, and much more. That'll be tomorrow.